Hello, everybody. Welcome to Leadership America, as we talk to the leaders in our world and the difference they continue to make. Brought to you by Air for Arts. My name is Scott Murray, and in the weeks ahead, we're going to be talking about, some incredible individuals that you have all come to know in the world of sports, in business, and for that matter, simply in life. These are difference makers in the world. People that you've all come to know because of what they do, and they all do it quite well, thank you very much. But we're also going to talk to you about each and every one of them about what they do behind the scenes and what they do when they're not at their job that we've all come to know. So we thought we'd kick it off with a couple of people that I'm sure you'll all recognize. They're wearing their specific colors as well. When they walked in the front door, I certainly knew which team they are associated with each and every day of their life. We're looking down to the far end of the table. We see a guy with a T on the shirt. That's Eric Nadel. Been with the Rangers for 4 decades. Incredible. 4 decades plus. Yep. And it's unbelievable, wearing the red. So it's great to see you, my friend. How you doing?
Thanks for having us here, Scott. I'm doing great.
Well, delighted to see you. And to his left, to my right, is another gentleman that we've all come to know. Joined the Cowboys in over 4 decades, 1976, as a matter of fact. And was alongside a fellow by the name of Vern Lundquist in the booth with the Dallas Cowboys. And shortly thereafter, when Vern went to CBS back, I think it was 1984, the guy that took the job front and center was Brad Sham. So good to see you again in your Cowboys blue.
Yeah, thank you. I think it's just blue, but thank you. It's
just
good to be here. Always good to be with Eric.
Yeah. And, of course, you both worked together, too. Was it 90, 95, 96, 97, I think, if memory serves me right after a couple of the Super Bowls that the Cowboys had in 92 and 93, and you both worked for the Rangers, right?
Yeah, I figured Brad would probably bring us a championship, and he actually brought us a division championship, but we couldn't go any farther than that.
I would like to point out that the Rangers never made the playoffs until I was in the booth with Eric.
That's exactly right.
That's a great point. I never thought of that. Very good. Well, you're both well aware of what this show is all about. I'm going to read the mission of what Air for Arts is all about. It's to provide a platform to nurture and celebrate artists and innovative thinkers through educational and inspirational and supportive programs and resources. It's all about helping creatives enhance their professional and their entrepreneurial skills, allowing them to prosper in their respective fields. So as we said, their day jobs, but this is about what they do away from that as well. But before we get to that, we thought we'd go back in time. I said 40 plus years for each of these fellas. That's an incredible legacy within itself. So we thought we'd just take a little time here at the top and talk about how they got involved in what they're now doing and what we've all come to know them for. They're both Hall of Famers in their own right and continue to do great things with the 2 teams that they do represent, 2 of the most popular and respected teams in the entire country, whether it's baseball or whether it's football. So I'll tell you what, let me go straight down to the end there. Eric, you joined the Rangers, it was 79?
Correct.
Okay. So it's been over 4 decades. Why? What was it that, as a kid, you grew up in Brooklyn, you were a Brooklyn Dodgers fan, did that all start back then?
I think it started back then. I don't specifically remember listening to Dodger games, which would have been hearing Vin Scully, in my early childhood. But we became Brooklyn Dodger fans, my sister and I, because my parents were diehard baseball fans, and they started taking me to Ebbets Field in 1957 when I was 6. Unfortunately for me, the Dodgers moved at the end of that year, and the only team we had left in New York was the Yankees. So we followed the Yankees more closely, and I would listen to Mel Allen and Red Barber on the radio. And one day I was driving with my father, who had taken a lunch break, and we were listening to a Yankees game, and I asked my dad, how did Mel Allen and Red Barber get to miss work today to go to the stadium for an afternoon game and broadcast the game? He said, well, no, that is their work. My dad was a dentist, and I said, so you're about to go back to the office and fill some cavities, maybe pull a tooth or 2, and these guys go to Yankee Stadium and get paid to just blah, 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 and drink Ballantine beer and smoke Camels, which they did on camera back then. He said, yeah. I said, Dad, they've got a better job than you do. That's what I want to do.
I'm not following in your footsteps, Dad, right?
All right. I'll get paid to watch baseball games.
Absolutely. How about you, Brad? You're born in Chicago, left, and then came back.
Yeah, we moved around a lot as a kid. My story is similar to Eric's, but as usual, Eric was smarter and understood things better than me. In my high school years, during the summer, I would watch and or listen to both the Cubs and the White Sox every day. And I had an epiphany one day that I was listening to the same announcers every day. Well, that meant that those announcers, little did they know about COVID, but that meant that those announcers were at the ball game every day. I want to go to the ball game every day. Now, unlike Eric, it didn't even occur to me that there was a living to be made. I wasn't thinking about literally anything but going to the ball game every day. And that led to my getting a journalism degree at Missouri, which led to the first job I got, which was here in town, as a news reporter. And that learned to understanding about the ways that you could marry journalism and being a sportscaster. And so I don't know if the rest is history, but the rest is the life I've lived.
And a pretty good one, I might add at that.
Yeah, not bad.
Yeah. Cubs, White Sox as a kid?
You know, we were, as a kid, we were raised to support Chicago teams. So I loved them both.
Okay.
I was living in Puerto Rico when the White Sox ended their World Series drought, lost to the Dodgers in '59, and that's still probably my all-time favorite team, the Go-Go Sox of '59. Mm-hmm. After Bill Veeck sold the team, for me, as a kid, different universe now, but they lost their personality. They lost what made them unique. And my mother was more of a Cub fan, and so I've become just a stupid Cub fan.
Well, again, let's go back, if we might, Eric. You talked about your dad being a dentist and what have you. I just wondered, along the way, other mentors or people that you looked up to. You said, gosh, whether it was a Harry Carey or,
No, Jack Brickhouse, yeah.
Oh, that's right. Okay, that's right. What about it? Anybody come to mind that really, not just back then, but even to this day, people that have made a big difference in your life? That have,
it kind of started with the New York announcers, and really not as much the Yankee announcers, but when the Mets came in '62 and were absolutely horrible, one of the worst teams in Major League history, their announcers, Lindsey Nelson and Bob Murphy, were eternally happy. Somehow they were happy every day, no matter how the Mets were getting their butts kicked. They were happy, and they sounded like it was fun at the ballpark. And they've been a real inspiration for me, especially with as many years as we've had with the Rangers like this one, where they're not going to make the playoffs, and you know that pretty early. So that was a big impact on me. Actually going into the business, Marv Albert was probably the biggest inspiration. He would do the Mets, he would do the Knicks and the Rangers. He wouldn't travel. He did whatever game was at Madison Square Garden. It was a pretty good gig. And I would get my homework done so I could listen to him. And more than anything, he convinced me this really is something to shoot for. But once I got into the business, probably the guy who helped me the most as a baseball announcer was John Miller, who was my first partner back in 1979 with the Rangers. I'd never done a baseball game. I was a hockey announcer when I came out of college, and I did minor league hockey for a few years. Happened to be in Dallas doing Dallas Blackhawks games when they asked me to audition for a job with them because a guy named Bill Merrill was about to retire. And I'd never done baseball. I listened to it. I probably heard thousands of games, but I'd never done a game. And John Miller pretty much showed me how to do it. Showed me the pacing, because it's so different. I'm going from hockey, the fastest sport, where you don't worry about how you're going to kill time, to baseball, the slowest sport, where the whole job is killing time. And John really was the guy. And then Mark Holtz, who became my partner in 1982, and he had done baseball for a long, long time. And between the two of them, John Miller and Mark Holtz, I somehow figured out, what I needed to do if I was going to be any good at this.
Interesting. Brad, how about you?
Well, as a kid, Jack Brickhouse was a guy in Chicago who did everything. He did Cubs and White Sox television, Bears radio. He was Mr. Sports in Chicago. I wasn't thinking about, when I was watching him, I was just enjoying him. I really wasn't thinking about a career then. And as Eric was influenced by the early Mets announcers, there were two guys doing Cubs radio named Vince Lloyd, who was a career WGN guy. They had like a farm system in Peoria, literally, and they would train their young announcers and bring them up. And Lou Boudreau, who's a Hall of Famer, was a player manager, was the color announcer. Now, Lou Boudreau could not diagram a sentence with a gun to his head. But and I didn't understand, Scott, that I was getting this from them at the time. They were exactly what Eric's talking about with Murphy and Lindsey Nelson. they talked about the smell of the ballpark. You could hear them talking about the cigars they were smoking and the hot dogs. But the game, for a horrible team, the game was always the most important thing. It was a lesson they weren't trying to teach that I absorbed and I never forgot. As I got a little older, traveling around the country, we lived in a lot of places, and KMOX in St. Louis had possibly as strong a signal as you would have on the radio, and I heard a lot of Jack Buck. And what I learned from Jack was, and later got to know him and be friends with him, which is one of the great joys of my life, what I learned from Jack was versatility and how to be enthusiastic while maintaining an even keel, something I've never really mastered, but being able to do anything. Those were the people I listened to. When I actually realized that I was going to do this, I was beyond privileged to work, as you mentioned, with Vern, who essentially taught me. I had done football, but I wasn't doing it. I wasn't doing what Vern was doing. And I had to sit next to him looking at the field that he was looking at, not seeing the things that he was describing, to learn how to see what he was seeing. And I worked for and with the late, great Frank Gleber, who is as naturally gifted a sports broadcaster as I've ever heard. He literally could take anything and make it sound like he invented it. And some of those same things I described in Jack Buck, I learned from Frank, but I learned them firsthand. And to add to that, Frank's personal life was colorful, but he had the most tangible love for his children that I'd ever seen. And for all of the events that he did, nothing lit him up like talking about his two youngest sons playing high school football. And one of them, Mitchell, the youngest, is now the president of the state fair, and Craig's been in operations for the Cowboys for many years. Nothing impressed Frank Gleber like talking about his kids. And then I would like to just say two other things quickly. I'm one of the few people in town who is old enough to have heard Eric do hockey. And if you think he's good at baseball, you should have heard him do hockey. And the other thing is, I've said this as many times as I can get an opportunity to say, sitting in front of a microphone. The 3 years that Eric and I worked together came about originally because we were friends and he knew of my love for baseball. Mm-hmm. I learned things about the art of our job, our business, from him that I still learn today. I'm a better football announcer today, every day, because I listen to him. Things he does that you don't even, he knows he's doing them. We don't even know he's doing them. And then all of a sudden you realize the entire canvas has been painted in brilliant colors, and you didn't see him do it. I mean, it's the reason that he is in the Baseball Hall of Fame.
It's quite an endorsement.
I like it.
And let's talk about the Hall of Fame, and I want to do that, and then we'll get to some of the other things we want to talk about. What was it, 2014? Yes. Cooperstown?
Yes.
Fort Frick? I mean, doesn't get much better than that if you're a baseball announcer. What's it like to be in the Baseball Hall of Fame in Cooperstown, New York?
Well, the whole thing was surreal. You know, the guys I listened to first as a kid, Mel Allen and Red Barber, were the first two winners of the Frick Award. And then Lindsey Nelson and Bob Murphy, the Mets announcers, won it a few years later. So they're all in there. And, you know, the whole concept that, you know, my face is on the same wall as theirs just seemed ludicrous to me. It's like, how did this possibly happen? And then to show up in Cooperstown that weekend with so many of my friends, including Brad, you know, going all the way up there. It's not an easy place to get to, you know, to be present.
Right.
And getting out of the car when I arrived at the Otesaga Hotel, and getting out of the car in front of me was Tom Seaver, one of my 2 or 3 boyhood idols, who I'd met a couple of times late in his career when he played for the White Sox. But to be getting out of a car, going into the same hotel where that weekend only Hall of Famers and like A-list celebrities can stay. Billy Crystal was there and Tom Brokaw was there, but otherwise it was just Baseball Hall of Famers. going to the room and going out to get some ice and waiting behind Ernie Banks at the ice machine to get some ice and seeing Whitey Ford taking towels off the maid's cart. It was like I had sneaked into some private club and got away with it.
Time to pinch yourself.
It was, and that's it. And you know, Denny Matthews, the Kansas City Royals announcer, who had won the award a few years prior to me, when I asked him for advice on the weekend, he said, try to take it all in. Try to slow it down because it's going to be over in a flash. And you're going to say, where did this weekend go? And as much as I tried, he was exactly right.
I have to tell you, on the day of Eric's induction, I think all of us with whom Eric had worked, except, of course, Mark, who's passed away, were there. And so it was hard to get anywhere near him, but we were together in the corner of the hall and we're having a conversation until somebody from the hall came up and said, excuse me, Eric, Billy Crystal would like to talk to you over here. That was when you knew you were at a different level.
Hello, big time.
That was ridiculous. You know, people ask me all the time if you could arrange a dinner with 4 people, who would those 4 people be? Billy Crystal would be one of my 4 people.
Yeah, I can imagine.
And I had never met him. You know, I had gone to his one-man show a couple of times. I actually sat in the first row at the Windspear Opera House.
Really?
And he looked at me and made eye contact, and it was like, I was like a girl swooning over the Beatles. It was incredible. And then a couple of years later, I actually got to meet him.
Well, you hear about what he did in Cooperstown Hall of Fame. Let's talk about the Texas Radio Hall of Fame for Brad Sham, but also the fact that you also, above the Cowboys, you've done what, 25, 26 Cotton Bowl Classics?
Yeah, something like that. And 6 degrees of separation. The first Cotton Bowls, the only time I did color, I did it with Lindsey Nelson.
Wow.
And Lindsey Nelson sent me a typed, hand-signed letter after the game thanking me for sharing the afternoon with him.
Whoa.
I mean, we're talking about a different species of cat here in Lindsey Nelson.
Did you keep in touch with him over the years?
No.
I actually met him, too. My freshman year in college, a patient of my dad's was a Mets season ticket holder, and he knew Lindsey Nelson and arranged for me to get down into the Mets dugout and ask Lindsey a bunch of questions. And the main thing that he just kept emphasizing was to be persistent in trying to get jobs, to not be shy, to meet as many people as you can and apply for as many jobs as you can, and don't get discouraged. The odds are against you, but if this is your passion, go ahead and do it.
I think it's interesting. It's interesting to me anyway, and maybe instructive to young people listening that there is, I will deign to speak for Eric, I don't think there is a universe in which either one of us think of ourselves on the same plane as Lindsey Nelson. Mm-hmm. And yet, that could be us now telling some kid somewhere saying, I met Eric Nadel, and he told me to do this and do that. And that to me is literally outside of the span that I can get my head around.
Well, I tell you what, you're reading my mind, Brad, because my next question to you, playing off of what you just shared, is the fact that you two are now the Lindsey Nelsons and whatever of that. Well, really, Brad, 4 decades plus for both of you at what you've done, and done it with teams that have the Rangers did go to the World Series. Yes, indeed. They finally got there, thankfully, because of Brad.
No. That was I got him to the playoffs.
Well,
He got the playoffs.
He
That's
got
right.
him to the World
That's
Series.
right. But in how many Super Bowls have you? 70. You did 78.
I've
78,
done
92,
4,
93.
I've done 4, 77 and 78, and 92 and 93.
And 78 was 12 when they beat the Broncos.
Right.
And and that was the second one, and again that was with Roger Staubach.
Right.
Not with Troy Aikman. So you're going back a long time ago.
All it proves is that we've been around a while. We're old.
But in this business, that speaks volumes. It really does. So my question here is this. If you were to have this opportunity, and just take a minute or so, what would you say to a youngster that happens to be watching this today and says, oh my gosh, it's Eric Nadel, it's Brad Sham, it's the Rangers, it's the Cowboys. Oh, I'd love to do what they do. What an incredible job to do that every day. What would you say to somebody out there that would like to follow in your footsteps someday?
I say it to kids all the time in college and high school kids. Number one, don't chase money. If you are doing what you're passionate about, then you're making enough money. Doesn't mean you don't want more, doesn't mean you don't need more. But you're making enough if you are passionate about what you do. And if you don't like what you're doing, there's no amount of money that will fill that hole. Money's not everything, and here's how I know. The people who have all the money, they're trying to get more money. So that must not be the answer. So chasing money won't help you. The other thing is, your attitude is up to you. Your attitude can't, Mickey Rivers played for the Rangers and had his own vocabulary. and they asked Mickey once, I was covering him just like any other reporter, and they asked Mickey about a big series the Rangers were getting ready to play, and was he worried about this series? And Mickey said, he thought about it for a second, he said, no. He said, I don't worry about what I can control, because if I can control it, it ain't no sense worrying about it. And I don't worry about what I can't control, because if I can't control it, ain't no sense worrying about it. And there's a long list of those things that you can't control. I tell kids this, Scott, all the time. You can't control the weather.
That's great advice, really.
You cannot control your boss. If you're in school, you can't control your teacher. If you're in a relationship, you damn sure can't control that person. The only things that I'm aware of that you can control are how hard you work and what your attitude is. So control those. Have a good attitude and work hard and pursue your passion. And everything else will happen as the universe or God or however you want to look at it intends for it to happen.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you. I always tell kids, be yourself, respect yourself, believe in yourself. Mm-hmm. That's what it's all about, because I can. Yep. End of conversation. How about you? Great thoughts what he had, and I'm sure you've got something to add to it.
That same day that Lindsey Nelson told me to be persistent, right, the guy who did the Mets pre- and post-game show, a guy named Bob Brown, was about to lose his job at the end of that year because the Mets were changing radio stations. And he didn't work for the Mets. He worked for the radio station. And he said, look, I've had this job for 10 years or whatever it is. I think I'm pretty good at it. I'm about to get fired because they're changing radio stations. So here's what you need to know about this business. There's no security in it. And he's absolutely right. I mean, Ernie Harwell got fired by the Detroit Tigers. John Miller got fired by the Baltimore Orioles, which both are absurd. So he said, if there's anything else you want to do in life that you're passionate about other than sportscasting, do the other thing, because it's probably more secure. He said, that's what I'm going to tell you today. So I do tell kids that. The odds are against you in this business. So my advice is to become versatile. If you want to go into baseball, well, learn some other aspects of it. Learn writing so you could be part of a public relations staff. Learn how to do sales. You could be part of a sales staff. There are lots of jobs within a baseball front office that you can prepare yourself for at the same time you're trying to prepare yourself to be a baseball announcer. If you're just interested in broadcasting, you're not interested in sports, then learn other aspects of broadcasting. Learn the behind-the-scenes jobs. Maybe that's what you want to do. There are a lot of people who want to do this who don't have a good enough voice in order to get a big-time job. So at some point, you're going to have to realize your limitations, and you may be better, in a support job than in the actual on-air talent job. So, I tell people that, and specifically, if they want to go into baseball in any aspect, I tell them to learn Spanish. About a third of the big league players now speak Spanish. A lot of them hardly speak any English. The teams have translators, but if you can talk to these players without a translator, you have a leg up on everybody else. You have a level of trust with the players that other members of the media don't have. So those are my key pieces of advice.
Great advice. Great advice. I came here 40 years ago this month. I was working at NBC in Washington, D.C., and the greatest event I ever covered was going to the Olympics in 1980 and being there at the hockey game when Mike Eruzione scored the goal, and the Russians lost to the Americans 4-3, and the gold medal came to the good old US of A. Neatest event. It's the first time, and I think the only time to this day, that I ever saw the media. Now, granted, they were from around the world, but they stood up and applauded. They were delighted that America had just beaten the Russians. How about you two fellas? Is there one that comes to mind? I remember being at the ballpark May 1st, 1991, when Nolan had his 7th. I'm sure you were in the booth that day. Other things, the Super Bowls that you've covered, for Pete's sake. Yeah. What is there one game or one moment that you stand out? Like, I will always remember that May 23rd. I mean, it was unbelievable in 1980 when the Russians, lost to the Americans.
Seen in person or worked?
I was in.
No, is your question something that we have seen in person or that we have worked?
Well, that's a good point, Brad. That's a good point. Well, if they're two different things, go ahead and just.
Well, I mean, I went to. Keep in mind, my mother raised me to be a Cub fan.
Okay.
In 2016, I went to Game 3 in Chicago. They lost, but they won the World Series, and they won the World Series. I came home
First
and told
time since 1908 or something?
I told my mother, who was then 91, they just did something that they've never done in your lifetime.
Yeah.
I'm going to tell you, there's too many running through my head. I've done a few Final Fours. Sitting next to him, doing the Rangers' first ever playoff game in Old Yankee Stadium. That's pretty good.
It is pretty good.
For a kid who grew up a baseball fan and you're in Yankee Stadium.
Yeah.
And we actually won that game.
And they won the game. That's pretty good.
That's
I have an Olympic.
That's really good.
I have an Olympic memory. I worked for CBS Radio, which was merging with Westwood One in Nagano, Japan, in 1998, and my job was to do a long-form talk show from 9 to noon local time, and at the end of the shift, then I would go cover whatever there was to be covered. So this one day, they're running a gold medal match in moguls.
All right.
Okay?
Yeah.
How much you know about moguls?
Not a lot.
Yes, that's what I knew. But they said, there's the briefing books. The bus leaves at 2, and so I'm at the mountain when Johnny Mosley from Colorado won America's first ever gold medal in moguls, and I did it live on CBS Radio. My claim to fame.
Mogul Man.
Mogul Man, yeah.
All right. How about you?
For me, the moment that stands out is the moment the Rangers won the pennant for the first time.
Right.
In 2010. Neftali Feliz struck out A-Rod. The ballpark went crazy. And I had thought about, how I was going to call it ahead of time. And, I planned to lay out and let the crowd tell the story, for a few seconds after the final out. It turned out I couldn't talk for about a minute because I was so overcome with emotion, the way the ballpark exploded. I didn't know that they were going to shoot off cannons of confetti everywhere. It was the loudest I've ever heard, a sporting facility. Everything about it was just really emotional. And that's way, way above everything else. Prior to that, the biggest moment in terms of excitement that I had ever called was, believe it or not, the 7th game of the Adams Cup Finals in 1978 when the Fort Worth Texans beat the Dallas Blackhawks in sudden death overtime at Will Rogers Coliseum. I thought the building was going to fall down. I honestly did. In that little press box up there that hangs from the roof, the whole place was shaking. And that was the most incredible moment that I'd been involved with until the Rangers won the pennant.
Very cool. Very cool. We're going to be back with Eric Nadel, Brad Sham. I'm Scott Murray. Don't go away. At Air for Arts, we recognize the importance of science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, or STEM, as being fundamental to human advancement. Nature teaches us, however, that a plant requires its stem and its foliage to truly thrive. Societies, too, need more than math and science to nourish the human spirit. The creativity generated through literature, entertainment, art and fashion, or LEAF provides this equilibrium essential to holistic growth. Air for Arts is leading community-wide efforts to view LEAF curricula through a technological lens and with an entrepreneurial mindset. By harnessing digital platforms for creative exploration, we add imagination, inspiration, and whimsy to our lives and wonder to our world. Welcome back as we continue on with Brad Sham from the Dallas Cowboys, Eric Nadel of the Texas Rangers, and they've both run around for over 4 decades. That is a legacy, my friends, and it continues here in the great state of Texas, here in the year 2021. I've got to ask you quickly, a couple of years ago, a pandemic, what is it, COVID-19? What is that all about? What has that been like for both of you? I can only imagine, and it does continue on, whether you're in practice, whether you're at the field house, whether you're hopping on an airplane, whether you're going to training camp, whether you're at the stadium, for Pete's sake. It's no fans. What's it been like? What 2 or 3 things that come to mind for you that have been really a jumbo pain in the neck?
Well, first thing that comes to mind are cardboard fans. We experienced last year. The Rangers called them Doppelrangers, doing games with cardboard fans, the home games, doing road games off televisions in the same booth that we would broadcast a game down below us, sometimes while another event was actually going on in the ballpark below us, and having no access to the players. In a 3-hour baseball game, the ball's in play for about 15 minutes. The rest of the broadcast is Matt Hicks and I filling time. The best way to fill time is with interesting stuff you get from talking to the players. We don't have access to the players. So it's really affected the way we do the job, and I think the quality of the broadcast, not to mention, when you're calling a game off TV, you can't see all the things you want to see. I can't give you the feel of the ballpark in Anaheim if I'm sitting in our ballpark in Arlington. So it's been a challenge. Fortunately, now we're traveling again, and we're kind of back to normal, but we still can't go into the locker room and talk to the players. It used to be open for hour and a half before every game. You could just wander around and chat with players, pick up interesting tidbits. We still can't do that.
Brad, how about you?
It's
Same thing?
It's similar. When Eric said we still can't talk to the players, the greatest thing anybody ever said to me was when Eric and I were working together, and the late Johnny Oates was the Rangers manager, and we would talk to him before the ball game, like baseball reporters have been doing for centuries, it feels like. And so I might say, Skip, that pitching change last night, or why did you shift? And he would look at me and he would say, that's why you're up here and I'm down there. It helped put things in perspective. Let me just preface it, Scott, by saying I am loath to complain, and I'm about to complain, but we still got to do our jobs. It didn't feel like our jobs the way we know how to do them, but we still got to do our jobs. And there are people lined up around AT&T Stadium who would do what I do for free. They don't want to hear my problems. And Bill Parcells famously said, never tell other people your problems. 90% of the other people don't care, and the other 10% are glad you got them. So don't tell people what's going on in your life. And he's right.
I never heard that one. I like that.
That said, the fact is, it's an inadequate way for people who take pride in our work to do what we do. You're limited to, especially on radio. If you're doing television, you are accustomed to relating the audience to what their picture sees, because that's your medium. What we do, we are all of your senses. I always say I'm talking to sightless people. I'm talking to people in duck blinds and truck drivers and cleaning their garages. And so I need to make you smell it. I need to make you see the colors. Well, if I'm limited to what the camera shows me, then I'm limited in how I'm able to do my job. And so there are just nuances in both sports, and I dare say in all sports, that are suddenly taken away from us. We don't have the ability to relay those nuances to the audience, and that doesn't even get to the part Eric was talking about lack of access. Anybody who was a rookie for the Cowboys last year, I haven't met him yet. I've not met him.
Isn't that crazy?
It's ridiculous, because what people expect of us when they listen to us, they expect insight that they're not going to get from network television announcers, and they have every reason to expect that. And the way we get that insight is by having personal, quiet, off to the side conversations, however brief, with players, coaches, executives, and you can't do that by text, and you can't do that on the phone. You do it face to face. Tell me about that guy. Is he getting anything? That tackle.
Yeah. You're the ones that have the inside story. You have the contact accessibility to the players,
but
and
we
when
don't.
It disappears.
But we don't.
It's a whole
anymore.
different world.
We don't.
Yeah.
And so and as we sit here having this conversation, I'm hopeful that we'll be traveling to road games, but I don't know that for sure. Yeah. And in training camp, now you didn't go to spring training, did you?
No, I did not.
Because
we had no access.
Because there was no access. And we're not going to have the kind of access that we're accustomed to. There'll be some opportunity for personal conversation, but it'll be supervised and public and in groups. So the best ways to be effective at these jobs, I think, have largely been taken away from us. And so we have to rely. In our case, I think it's good that each of us has a relationship already with the audience, because when I turn on a Ranger game, now I know who Eric is not talking to and who he is talking to. But that's because we're friends. And the average listener is really not aware of that, and they hear Eric describing the game, and they hear Eric and Matt's conversation, and it's familiar, and they feel like they're not missing out on anything. That's because he's so good at what he does, and it's also a function partly of longevity. And so it's our job now until, and hopefully until, that normalcy is restored. It's our job to maintain that facade.
Understandable. Well, I just wanted to have you share that with the audience, because it is a whole different world. Nothing like any of us in our lifetime have ever been a part of. Yeah, challenge for sure. Before we wrap things up, let's head down the home stretch and just talk about what this program is all about. Conversations with Legends. That's why you're both here. But again, Air for Arts. And some of the things that you do away from sports, away from broadcasting, radio, TV, whatever it might be, what you're doing when we don't see what you're doing from an art standpoint, some of the things that you're involved in. Go ahead, Eric.
Well, I'm really passionate about music. I have been since my sister brought home an Elvis Presley record in 1956, I think it was. And I've been working with a couple of nonprofits to help them raise money and name recognition by putting on concerts. You know, we have a monthly series with Cafe Momentum, which is the incredible nonprofit restaurant in downtown Dallas.
Now, is that the Sunday night event that you do?
The Sunday night event,
right.
Yeah. They train juvenile offenders when they come out of jail. They give them a 1-year paid internship in the restaurant business, after which most of them, almost all of them, either get jobs or go to college. The recidivism rate of these kids is barely over 10% compared to over 50%, for the general population that comes out of these juvenile detention centers. And once a month on a Sunday, we do a Sunday supper concert series where I get to book the band, which is unbelievable. Once a month, I can choose the musical artist I want to play, and as long as they're willing to play for what our budget is, I get to enjoy that once a month. It raises money and awareness for the incredible job that Cafe Momentum's doing. And once a year, I do a benefit concert on my birthday at the Kessler Theater. And the beneficiary now is the Grant Halliburton Foundation, which provides mental health programs and suicide prevention programs in schools. They do amazing work. And that's a joy for me, too. It takes a lot of planning and trying to figure out who the best artist is for each year. And again, it's a bigger venue, so I can get bigger name artists usually than the people who play at Cafe Momentum. And I'm so fortunate to be able to do that.
Were you able to do the Momentum series, Cafe Momentum series during COVID?
No, we were closed down for over a year, and we had a number of artists booked last year who we have rebooked, almost all of them. A couple of them were actually canceled twice. The ones who were scheduled for March and April of last year, we rescheduled them for later in the year, and then had to cancel them again.
Yep, as many groups did. Yep, absolutely.
That thing, Scott, one of the things about this last year and a half that puts us societally in a precarious position, in my opinion. I'm looking at the mission statement for Air for Arts. to provide a platform to nurture and celebrate artists and innovative thinkers through educational, inspirational, and supportive programs and resources. I'm a big believer in all aspects of the arts. I happen to be a fan of the performing arts, but I think that writing, music, poetry, acting, any expression of art is fundamental to the richness of the kind of society which I think we have long taken for granted. And even during the pandemic, we missed it, but then we were kind of all being coached to believe that everything would come back to normal, and it isn't quite, but it kind of is. We're back in movie theaters, and Broadway's going to open, and local live theater is going to happen, and you have to think about what Eric just said about the shutdown of that program at Cafe Momentum for a year and a half. Mm-hmm. And I think that while we are celebrating whatever has returned, it behooves us to think about what life would be like without those things, because we didn't have them. Mm-hmm. And we were, people were running out of things that had already been shot to stream. And everything is going to be changed, informed by things that grew in movies and television. The streaming industry is going to change the way movies are made and released, and television shows and all of that. But you have to think about the richness of life that is painted in by the existence of art. And then you have to think about what life would be like without all of those forms. That includes architecture. It includes anything that's artistic, mm-hmm. because there are a lot of people who didn't have a problem with taking away funding for arts. Well, I don't think we're better without all these different artistic expressions. So I think I missed. I happen to have subscriptions to 4 local theater companies. Mm-hmm. I think I missed live theater and live music more than I missed sporting events. Now, fair enough, I'm jaded because I've seen a lot of sporting events. But I missed those things, and they are just beginning to come back. And so what I hope happens is that people understand the importance of supporting them, not just saying, oh, yes, I like to go to the theater. You better go to Cafe Momentum. If Eric Nadel says this artist is worth your time, mm-hmm. then you better come out and support them so that that artist has an opportunity to have a career. To say nothing of Cafe Momentum being able to continue its mission, and the Grant Halliburton Foundation, to say nothing of that. These artists ran the risk of losing what they did, and that affects all of us. So that comes to my mind when I think about what we've been through, and the only other thing I'll say has nothing to do with that, but a lot of my life is spent in spiritual pursuits and the practice of my faith. I have been on a 15 or 16-year spiritual journey that's been about trying to figure out what my purpose is in being here and making sure that I'm contributing to that instead of just taking up space.
Well put. Well put. My mother was a concert pianist. And had it not been for, both my parents were artists with a paintbrush. And had I not grown up in that environment, as much as my dad and I used to like to go to the ballpark or go to a football game or go to a hockey game, my dad was born in Nova Scotia, so I had a hockey stick before I had a baseball bat. So trust me, I remember those days in playing in the backyard with the snow in upstate New York in the Erie Canal. I say, people say, you a Yankee, Scott? And I said, well, I used to pull for the Yankees, but I said, I was born in I call it Mayberry RFD without the drawl. Had a barber shop and a gas station. That was it, and we were right on the Erie Canal. Lockport, Brockport. That's Darrell Johnston from Lockport. And all those small little towns along the Erie Canal. And that's, we had 45 kids in my graduating class. So it was a whole different world. But
I had that many in my biology class.
Yeah. Well, it's crazy. But arts is such an important part of it. And what you both said is spot on. And that, of course, is what Air for Arts is all about. And that's what, initiates this program here as we talk about conversations with legends. So we kicked it off with two of the finest. So I'm going to finish it up by saying to both of you, I've said legacy quite often today. Fits you both. Legends. Don't be overly humble on me. Just be honest. What would you like to be remembered best for? Who you are, what you're all about, your legacy. So years from now, somebody goes to the Hall of Fame, you've passed away, and they see in Cooperstown, who's this guy? Eric?
Don't rush
Eric
him out
Nadel.
the door so fast.
Eric Nadel, who is I? No, excuse me, decades from now. And the same thing with you, Brad. The same thing. I mean, my gosh, 1976, you joined the Cowboys? That's almost half a century ago,
yes,
for Pete's sake.
Thank you. I'm shooting for that.
And we're not rushing you along either, my friend.
Thank you.
But, I mean, think about it. I mean, I can't think of two people. And you both worked with two great friends of mine and two people that I respect to this day as much as any broadcasters outside of yourself, Eric Nadel and Mark Holtz, Brad Sham, and Vern Lundquist. I mean, it doesn't get better than Mark or Vern. So just talk about your legacy and how you would like to be remembered as we go forward. Our children, our grandchildren, our great-grandchildren, what comes to mind?
I mentioned Marv Albert earlier and what it was like to listen to him when I was in high school. And at one point listening to him, I just thought, wouldn't it be amazing if I actually got to bring into people's lives the joy that he brings into my life, the entertainment that he brings into my life, the distraction from whatever problems I was having, as an adolescent. I'd like people to remember me as someone who was able to do that, to bring some joy into their life. And Brad touched on the other broader idea of making the world a better place, in as many ways as you can. In my case, being passionate about a couple of nonprofits and, helping them do the things that they do. They're doing the hard work. By my status as some sort of minor celebrity, I'm able to help them. And, I think it's my responsibility to do that. My wife, Jeannie, tells me all the time, be the light of the world. I want people to be able to look back on my life and say that, I was a light in the world. And as many different ways as I can do that, whether it's, writing a book, which I did a couple of years ago, a book of limericks to, amuse people, or, whatever else I can do as a broadcaster to make people's lives more fun, more entertaining. And Brad talked about the audience and trying to figure out who your audience is. Are they in their garage, or are they on their boat, or whatever it is? Wherever they are, if I can make their day better, then I want to be remembered as somebody who was able to do that.
Well, you're well on your way, my friend.
Thanks.
Brad, how about you?
We're gifted with the ability to be storytellers, and that has a function. I mean, immodestly, that has a function. I have great discomfort with the word legacy because, to me, it presupposes some thought being given about what people will think of me later, and that's a little more egocentric than I think I function well in dwelling on. I think I'm better served by trying to set an example while I'm here for how I live. The words that immediately came into my mind were honesty and integrity. And I think that one of the things that I'm proud of, I'll say it that way, is, and I think that it applies to both of us, and it is partly a function of our longevity, but it's also probably part of the reason for it, is that when people hear us say something, for the most part, they trust us. We're telling them the truth. If we weren't telling them the truth, we wouldn't have lasted this long. I mean, neither of us is good looking enough to be able to have that going for us if you don't tell the truth. And I think that if I can show both our audience and young people who might be thinking about doing this, that you can be responsible, you can have integrity, you can be true to yourself, you can tell the truth, and you can be fair to the product, then that's a legitimate enough goal for me to pursue.
Good one. Well, I tell you what, even though you're being humble,
I've got a lot to be humble about, Scott.
I'll say to both of you, for somebody that won a 4-year scholarship to the Eastman School of Music is for drums and then but didn't want to do that. Wanted to become a pediatrician because my best friend died of leukemia when we were both in second grade, and then got a job when I was 17 years old as a freshman in college, doing a radio show, doing the all-night show my freshman and sophomore years, and then getting into television, into sports, and never went on to medical school. It's crazy. So I've listened to your stories. That's my story in 10 seconds. It's funny how it happens, but I think the key is making a difference in the lives of those that need it most. And both of you do that every single day. You do that on the air, but you do it away from the air. And that's what we've just discussed here today. So that's why we chose you to be our inaugural special guests here on Conversations with Legends. But let me say something that has nothing to do with anything. I've been in this business. I was a sports anchor for 35 years. It's incredible all the things that I've gotten a chance to do and the hundreds of events that I MC every year for charity. I say with all due respect, and I mentioned I mentioned Mark Holtz, and I mentioned Vern Lundquist, two great guys, tremendous guys. But as I look at both of you eye to eye, face to face, I can't think of two people that I have more respect for in this business.
Thank you.
Not just what you do on the air, but who you are off the air. And you just said a minute ago, honesty, respect, integrity. It's like what I say when I talk about my champions, creating champions of culture through a culture of civility, through courage, commitment, character, compassion, not confrontation, but conversation. That's what we've done here today. That's what both of you continue to be. So thanks for your legacy, even though Brad doesn't like that word, and thank you for your legacy.
Thank you. I'm comfortable with his legacy. I'm just not comfortable with it for me.
We're all comfortable with both your legacies, and we thank you much.
Scott.
Till next time, be strong and always stay safe.